So many people coming on today. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. I just want to quickly go over a couple ground rules. So this meeting is a safe space, and there will be a zero tolerance policy for racist, misogynistic, homophobic, and transphobic comments. So if we hear any of that through the chat or coming from you directly, we will ask you to leave the meeting. And we are live streaming to Facebook, and this meeting is also being recorded. So if you would like to be off video, just turn your video off so that you're not being recorded. Please use the chat to submit your questions. We'll be taking questions at the end, but if something comes up in your mind, you're welcome to put it into chat and I will read the questions later. If you could stay muted for the meeting, that would be awesome, just so we minimize kind of the background noise. We will unmute at the end if there's a chance to mingle and if there's still time. Thank you so much. My name is Evelyn Tanaka. My pronouns are she and her. I am the GPC candidate of record for Calgary Shepherd and the current deputy leader of the Green Party of Alberta. Thank you so much for having me today as your moderator. I'm speaking to you today from Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we will start today's roundtable with a land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge the territories of the diverse First caretakers, known in English as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, of Turtle Island, or the land now known as Canada. And further, we give thanks to the traditional keepers of this land and water for sharing their land, resources, and knowledge with us. So without further ado, I'd like to ask each of the panelists today to introduce themselves just briefly. And we'll start with Evelyne Huytebroeck from the Green Party of the European Green Party.
Do you hear me? No problem. You can show if you hear me. You hear me when I speak?
We can hear you, but very faintly, Evelyn. If you're able to turn up your sound, that would be better. We can only hear you faintly.
Yes. Do you speak? You hear me now?
We can hear you now. That's great.
Okay. You show me if there is a problem, huh? Okay, I present myself. I'm Evelyne Huytebroeck, and I'm from the European Green Party. I'm co-chair of the European Green Party, but I'm also Belgium, and I'm from Brussels, and I am French-speaking. So yes, don't speak too fast in English, because my English is yes, I'm not so fluently. So maybe that if there are some French speaking, I can also make the mixed, but I try to do it. Okay, and so for a short presentation, but you have seen my CV. It's a very long time that I'm in the Ecologist Party, the Green Party of Belgium. I was regional MP, member of the regional parliament in Brussels during a long time, maybe too long, 30 years. And I was regional minister of climate, environment, energy, and social affairs. And now since 1 year, I'm co-chair of the European Green Party. European Green Party is a federation of 45 green parties. So it's not only the 27 parties of the European Union, it's more large than that. And so my co-chair is Thomas Waits from Austria. He is member also of the European Parliament. And I'm also local councillor in Brussels. That's for the presentation.
Thank you, Evelyne. Let's go to Nira now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you, Evelyn, and thank you, David, for inviting me to participate in the roundtable. I'll just be brief with quick facts. I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I have a BA and MA in philosophy from the University of Winnipeg in Toronto. I've been a member of the GPC since 2014. I ran as the Green federal candidate in Ottawa-Vanier in 2015 and co-managed the campaign in Ottawa Centre last year. I've served on shadow cabinet as the justice critic. I've served as the CEO of Ottawa South EDA. I'm serving now as the Eastern Ontario rep for the Green Party of Ontario, the provincial exec, and was a committee member on their policy for motion development process this fall and winter, and am currently a member of the GPC Members Co-Leadership Committee. And we've done a bit of work over quite a few efficient weeks this winter and come up with a discussion paper, which I can talk about later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nira. I think like so many GPC members, so involved in so many things. Thank you for attending today. And finally, we'll go to David, who is our leadership contestant.
Thanks very much. I'll be very brief. I am running for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada. I was a Green Party candidate in Esquimalt Saanich-Sooke in 2019. I just want to make a quick acknowledgement on this call. I think there's one other leadership candidate on the call, Amita Kutner. Amita, thank you very much for joining us. We have 9 fantastic candidates running in this leadership race, which I think all of you will know, perhaps apart from Evelyn, that the cutoff date for new memberships is September 3rd. I hope you will all get out there and sell memberships, and the announcement of the winner will be on October 4th, which is coming up very quickly, it feels. So thank you all for joining this call. I really look forward to the conversation about co-leadership. Back to you, Evelyn.
Awesome. So we're going to launch right into our panel discussion with Evelyn, David, and Nira. So most of these questions are going to be aimed at Evelyn because we really want to learn what the European Greens have done, but Nira and David are going to chime in with their ideas as well. So first question is, what are the key benefits of co-leadership?
Mm-hmm. Yes, what are the benefits? So you have to know that I have 2 experiences. I'm co-chair with Thomas Waite from Austria here in the European Green Party, but before I was also co-chair in 2002 in Belgium from the Green Party, because you have to know that it's not general for the Green Party in Europe to have co-chair. We have 2 co-chair in Belgium. We have that in Luxembourg, in Germany, and also for the parliamentary group in the European Parliament, where there are 2 co-chair. The first idea of this formula, I can say, is the parity. It's a man and woman, but you have different kind also of co-chair, because, for example, in Belgium, it's an obligation for us, Green Party, to have someone from Wallonia, who is a region in Belgium, and from Brussels, who is another region. So it's very difficult also to make the combination, because you need to have a woman and a man, and you have also to have someone from a different region from the country. And also they present, that's a little bit the difference between, for example, Belgium and the European Green Party, is that in Belgium, the 2 co-chairs, they present themselves as a team together. For EGP, no. It's not a team, even if for us, Thomas Waite and me, we were presenting as a team. But the vote from the delegates from each Green Party is going first to the women and then also to the men. So 2 different votes. So as I said, the idea was also of parity. But in the function, it's an equality between them. So in the terms of the communication, in the terms of the decision, and also in the terms of the leadership and also the preparation of all the meetings of our committee or the meeting of the council. What's also interesting when you say the benefits is that we try to have also two complementary persons. For example, with Thomas and me, we are quite different. Of course, he's a man and a woman, but not only that, we are also different because he is really from the rural side of Austria. So he's a real farmer. And I'm very urban. I'm from a big city in Brussels. And I'm very involved also in the question of the local councillor, of the green cities, and Thomas is more involved in the question, for example, of the agriculture and also question of rural topics. So we are really very complementary, and that's very also very important. What we did at the beginning of our function in November is that also we, even if we decide everything together, the political decision, communication and so, we divide, as I can say, geographically Europe in two parts. Because he's from Austria, he's more involved in the East countries and the Central countries, and I'm more involved in the South of Europe and also in the North of Europe. It means that for the bilateral meetings that we have with the Greens from these countries, for example, if there is a question, political question, or meeting with the Italian Greens, it's me that I organize this bilateral meeting. If it's, for example, with the Polish Greens, it's more Thomas who organize that, even if we always make the summary of our meetings together. And if there is a big political question, for example, going in a majority in a government and so, we decide, of course, and we discuss together. It's also, we divide also because you have to know that the European Green Party, we have a lot of networks. For example, we have a gender network, we have the network for LGBT, we have a network for local councillor, we have the Young Greens, and so we divide also the two networks between us. So I participate, for example, to the network of Mediterranean networks. He participates to the gender network. So that's also a division that we have. And so it's also more easy to be present when we are two. Another benefit is also for the press release, because we try always to make some press release when there is a question. For example, last week where there were this election in Belarus, and so we had a contact with our friends from the Greens from Belarus, and I proposed to make a press release. We tried to discuss it together, and we make a press release where there is a quote from Thomas and from me. What we don't do is that one, for example, is dedicated to the administration and the other for the political question. No. For all the political question, we are involved in it together. So it's not also the question that because sometimes it happens that the woman is for the administration question or for the staff or to manage the staff, and the man is taking the political decision. No, it's absolutely not like that. The political decision are always, we share them together. So these are I think the main interest. It's not easy. It's not always easy, because it's always more easy to decide alone. But I think it's also very interesting to have two persons, and certainly when these persons are very different, they have another experience. Because, for example, I have the experience being a minister to be in an executive, to manage also teams and so. And I have an experience more on regional and local level. And for example, Thomas, who was never in a majority or minister or like that, but he's a member of the European Parliament. And so he's more maybe involved in the European question. So it's really a complementarity between he and me, and that's really very very interesting. So I think that's for the first question.
Thank you, Evelyn. David and Nira, do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
Nira, would you like to go first? You're welcome to.
So I know that we have a list of questions. I made a little sort of executive summary of what I thought were the benefits of co-leadership. Would this be the place to say that, or should I wait?
Go for it.
Until, yeah, okay. So I'm not going to explain these in great detail. We spent quite a lot of time looking them up, and we can have a discussion after if people want to ask, and I'll answer what I can, and Evelyn and David will also have things to say, I'm sure. So here's my little list of 10 reasons why I think co-leadership warrants, that model warrants a really good look by the GPC membership and leaders. And I'm calling it 10+1 because I came up with an 11th. So very briefly, the notion at that top level of sober second thought, I have seen in my work in the GPC and in other organizations how important that is. And we know that because we have a House of Commons and a Senate for the same reason. So we already we have this value of collaboration, and taking that right to the top in terms of having two co-leaders simply makes the rest of our structure consistent with our value of collaboration. 2, shared responsibility for decision making has the effect of being, if it's done well and right, very, very much more efficient for the organization, because it reduces perception of risk and fear of making the wrong decision. So we all know in our own lives, making a decision and ricocheting all the pros and cons in your head is more anxiety producing and less effective and time effective in the end than having someone you can go back and forth with and externalize the conflict so that it's clear to see what are the variables involved and the risks and benefits. 3, really it's the best of all worlds, the best of both, or really in our case in Canada, the best of all worlds, because as we know in the GPC right now and in Canada in general, we're dealing with increasing diversity and an increasing voice among underrepresented peoples all across the country and within the party, that their voices are not heard and weighed equitably and effectively within party decision making. And clearly having, as Evelyn mentioned, at least 2 people from very diverse backgrounds in many ways, not just around culture or language, but in terms of rural, regionalism, rural, urban, etc., will help build greater representation with that co-leadership model. We're at 4, we're a very small party, and our resources are fewer than the other parties. And changing our structure to allow us to be more effective playing with the big guys, having co-leaders to divide that massive crushing workload of the leader just on a very pragmatic level is the very smart thing for us to do. 5, I'm just going to mention that Quebec Solidaire has a co-leadership model. We looked at that in our work in the committee, Their version really very clearly states that the leader of a party is the spokesperson for the party. They're not making policy, and they're not doing all the other things that historically sometimes our leader in a very small party has ended up having to do. That's not the role of the leader, and it leads to role confusion that causes confusion in the party, I would submit. They also have I'm not sure if it's them or someone else we looked at, but there's a way in terms of the mechanics. If you elect one leader, the membership elects one leader, say 2020, and then they elect a co-leader in 2021, and then they elect, so there's a kind of rotating, overlapping way that you can do that, the mechanics. 6, I just want to say that co-leadership has to be done as a real partnership and not as any kind of tokenism. And we're seeing down south with Biden choosing Kamala Harris as his co-leader, that I mean, these are politically smart things to do, and he'll be very politically smart if he understands how smart and solid Kamala is, and make sure that it's perceived that there's a complete equality and parity between them. Well, I know she's a vice there, but in co-leadership, otherwise it looks like tokenism, and we don't want that. I think I'll just skip down a little bit. Co-leadership is also a way to allow underrepresented groups to get onto a leadership track within the party. It's a version of, I'm not saying mentoring, but it's a way to allow talent within the party to grow with that model, because people who might not take on the whole thing would very much take on a co-leadership model. That's shown in every organization. 9, it's a very bold and innovative statement to ourselves as a party and to the country that we are willing to do and able to do politics differently. It's a different model. It seems shocking to some people. We've never done it. It's not in our constitution, etc. But it's a very bold statement that Greens, when they look at the actual situation on the ground, will make the structural changes, as well as all the other changes, to meet the demands of the day. And just for the leaders themselves, I'd say 10, it's lonely at the top. It's a lot less lonely if you have a co-leader. And all of us who've co-ed anything, I co-campaign managed last year in Ottawa Centre, hugely value-added arrangement. There we divided it. I was campaign manager strategic, and the other person was operational. It worked very well. You could arrange that. And finally, my 11 is that it keeps leaders humble, because it's a check and balance built in at another level of the organization. If you can keep things in your head, we're all human, we can rationalize all kinds of stuff. When you have to share and justify decision-making with another person outside, in a conversation outside between two people, rather than in your head, it's another added level of check and balance that you're going to make the best decision, because it's going to be applied. The rigor of the question and answer and the conflict resolution mechanism is going to apply more rigor to decision-making. Thank you. So I know that was a lot, but that was a summary of my thoughts on it.
Thanks a lot, Nira. That's great. I'm going to be very brief because I think we've covered so much. One of the things I've noticed in traveling across the country, I'm on my second cross-country trip for the leadership campaign, is that different people in different parts of the country have views on how co-leadership should work. And an example is in Quebec, people are saying, that's great. We'll have a Francophone leader and an Anglophone leader. And then in other parts of the province, and by the way, feel free to ask questions in English or French. Nous sommes un parti bilingue et un pays bilingue. Et si vous voulez écrire vos questions dans la boîte en bas de la boîte chat, vous êtes le bienvenu. Questions in French are very welcome on this. But outside of Quebec, people don't usually focus on language skills. They say, well, you know, gender equality should be represented. Others say, well, just male and female, or have we moved beyond that? Is there more than that we should consider? Where do transgender people fit as well? The other thing, though, in terms of the positives, is that many, many people say we have such a big country. It's very hard for one leader to show up, especially during the short periods of election campaigns. It's difficult to cover the whole country. There's no way one leader can go to 338 ridings, for example. So people are saying the co-leadership model would really help in a large country like Canada just to cover the ground. And people are also hopeful that the media in Canada pays very little attention to the Green Party. And the idea that by having two co-leaders, it makes us much more accessible to the media here, and it'll help us to break in more, especially in the major media. We may not want to interview a deputy leader, especially if CBC gets the leader, CTV won't want the deputy leader, right? But if there are two co-leaders, you can cover it off more easily. So these are some of the things that I'm hearing on the campaign trail.
Thanks, David. So we'll move into our second question, and we'll try to keep answers to 2 minutes each so we can get through our whole agenda today. What are some of the key challenges, or as Peter said in the chat, what are some of the negatives of co-leadership, and how does the party address these challenges? We'll start with Evelyn.
Yes, what are the obstacles? Maybe difficulties is that maybe, of course, it takes more time to make a decision when you are two than when you are only one person, of course. So you need to have a direct link with your co-partner also, and also to be very rapid, because if you need a reaction to the press or to the media, you need to react very, very quickly. That's not always easy. A bigger obstacle, but I didn't know that, is that you have a different, but it can happen, a different perception on a political question. That's more difficult, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen so much, and though so. Yes, I think the advantage also is that we can show also to the public, and in Europe they understand that we make, that's also a different way to do politics, and that it seems that we do it more collective, and that the party is not only one person, one image. And sometimes it can be difficult for the citizens, because you can see also that the public opinion, they like to have an image, an identification. And when you are two, it's also more difficult, because they are waiting to have one person. And so you have to explain that, yes, your model is another model, and that's also more collective. So yes, maybe that's my first answer.
Awesome, thank you. Nira?
We're talking about the challenges, is that correct?
Yes, the challenges,
Yes.
or some of the negatives of co-leadership.
Let me just collect my thoughts, because I've got a lot of thoughts here.
And if you want me to go first, I can, Nira, while you're doing that.
I think, okay, I'll just say one thing.
Go ahead.
I think that there's an optimal size and scope for everything. I don't think that smaller is better, say one leader and that's it, because we know how that works. Or well, if we're going to go collective and collaborative, someone made a comment in the chat, well, you know, one of the challenges is often taken to be, you know, what happens when we have decision making by committee. Either nothing happens, or we dither back and forth trying to listen to everybody's point. Nothing happens, or it happens too late. I don't think I think it's a false dilemma to say we either have one leader, as we've always done and the other parties do, or we open it up and say two, and somehow that implies that, well, we should have three then, or maybe four, or maybe five, and it's a slippery slope. I think that in my thinking and our committee's thinking through this so far, there are benefits to co-leadership. We even talked in the committee about three, right? And talked about the pros and cons. And I think that we have to do kind of fairly precise thinking and look at what's actually being done out there and historically what's worked. But I think there are optimal sizes for things. Plato always said that there was an optimal size for the city-state. And if you got bigger than that, you really couldn't manage it with real democracy. I actually think that's what's happened in most of the large countries in the world. Be that as it may, we are a big federation and we have to manage this whole country. I think there are more things to be said in favor of two people. There are more benefits in favor of two co-leaders then would discount this option, because I don't think a co-leadership model is the same as leadership by committee, because we do know there are problems with that. So that's all I'll say for now. Thanks.
One of the things I've done as I've traveled across the country is I've asked people for both sides, what do they think? And what I've heard in terms of the negatives, it started actually in my own riding. In Esquimalt-Saanishuk, we have the largest naval base on the West Coast. And one of the people I was talking to about this idea said, you know, politics is like warfare. You can't do politics or warfare by committee. You have to have one clear line of command, and there needs to be one person in charge. And it was a very interesting comment on what politics is like and how this person saw politics, the lens they saw it through. And just yesterday, I'm in Kitchener right now. We had an event in the Victoria Park in Kitchener. And as we were leaving, I went to a lady with a walker. I think she must have been in her 80s or 90s. She had an assistant with her. And I said, thank you very much for coming out in these difficult times. I really appreciate you being here. And she said, I don't like your co-leadership idea. And I said, oh, why is that? And she says, because it makes too much sense. And I looked at her and I said, okay. And she says, politics doesn't make sense. And it's a very interesting idea. Part of this co-leadership idea, I think, depends on how you see politics. If you see it as warfare or something that is not really a very logical process, it's an emotional process, you might actually see this concept of co-leadership through a different lens. So very interesting comments on the campaign trail. I've asked people throughout to do thumbs up, thumbs down, or maybe in the middle on the idea. And I've got to say, it's probably 80-20 right now in terms of thumbs up, thumbs down. Maybe 5 or 10%, so it varies, will say they need to see that the devil is in the details. So that's how I've been hearing on the positive and negatives on the campaign trail. Back to you, Evelyn. Or if you want to jump in, the other Evelyn, feel free.
Yes.
And,
if I can, you hear me? If I can add some, yes, maybe I can add something, because I didn't explain what is the composition and how we are working. You have to know that we have a committee with 9 persons coming from different countries in Europe. We are elected, the 9 persons, for 4 years, and we are elected by the delegates coming from each countries. We, or the 2 co-chair, we are part of this committee. We have a meeting once a month where we decide the big question, and we, the 2 co-chair, we are the political responsible and the spokesperson from the committee. But we have also a general secretary, Mar Garcia, who is Spanish. She is paid, she has a salary to do that, and she manages the team. We have a team of 25 persons working for the European Green Party, coming from everywhere in Europe. The main language is English, but we have people coming from Serbia, from Lithuania, from Netherlands, so different, really different language. And our team, the 25 persons, we have 4 units. One is an administrative unit, one is communication, 5 persons, for the social media, but also for the press, for the campaigns. And we have also a political unit and a budget unit. So that's the structure. And then we organize 2 councils per year with all the delegates from the countries. And during the council, all the delegates together are about 150 persons who decide also, and who make the vote and who vote for the person in the committee and the person who are co-chair. That's to explain the structure of the European Green Party.
Thank you. I think you anticipated our question, which is how are members involved in the decision-making to implement co-leadership? Maybe we'll take a step back and just ask you what initiated the European Greens' interest in co-leadership in the first place?
What can I, yes. So your question is, what is the benefit of to be the to have a co-leader of EGP? Yes, is it that your question?
What initiated the interest in co-leadership in the first place?
Yes, that was, yeah, you know, it's in the statute. If I take the example of Ecolo, the Belgian Green Party, it's from the beginning, and maybe that's the first reason was to have one woman and one man, but also to have a team. This team, as I said, it's not the same for EGP, where you have two persons and where you need the support of 3 different parties in Europe to be presented. But what's also important is that the delegates, they don't vote only for 2 persons. They vote first for a program, and this program we have to defend it during some debates, during some discussion where the parties can ask a question to the candidates, and also this program is on different level, is how you see, for example, the 4-year for the future before the next election, what is the activity plan, what is also the main topic that we want to defend, what are the priorities, for example, and also what is our experience. It's also important that experience is also needed, and also that you are able to discuss with, you know, we have, as I said, 45 different Green Party, and we have to be able to discuss with the Norwegian Green like we can discuss with the Cyprus Green. So it's maybe different from Canada, but it's important also to have this empathy, to listen, and to be capable to discuss with all these Greens coming from different parts of Europe. And then there is also an important thing is, I said, there is a team of 25% that we have also, even if it's more the general secretary who have to manage this team, we also are responsible for this team. So we have also to, so it's a work, it's a political work together with a managing team, with a communication, and also to decide on a political way. So it's a mixture between all these functions, I can say.
Perfect, thank you. So if I'm understanding properly, you and your co-chair are both elected and you ran as a team, is that correct?
Yes, we are elected by the council, by the 150 delegates, and to be a candidate, you need to be supported by minimum three countries. Of course, it can be more. I had, for example, more than 20, and Thomas also. And we presented together as a team with a program, and with a program for the 4 years. and with very clear priority. And we defend them during the council, and during the council, then the delegates are voting for you. We had a chance that we didn't have another team, so no concurrence. But for example, in Belgium, when I was co-chair, we were 3 teams. So we had to do a big tour in all the different part of Belgium. Fortunately, Belgium is not very big countries, to explain our program and to defend it, and to have a debate with the members. And it's during 2 or 3 months that we have to make this discussion with the members.
Awesome, thank you. Nira, do you have anything to add about, why this committee was struck in the first place with the GPC, and what the interest was initially for co-leadership?
We formed, I'm going to read you just the introduction to the discussion paper, which which can be sent out. We formed the group with a motivation to understand the benefits and pitfalls of co-leadership models, and to investigate the barriers and path to making the co-leadership model available to leadership contestants of the Green Party of Canada. So we were interested actually within the time frame of our leadership contest going on now, to have members, to provoke some discussion and have members think about this model, because, partly the timing is that we're in a leadership contest. And so what is on our minds right now is, what is leadership? What do we need in a leader? What do we need in a leader of the Green Party or co-leaders at this point in time? Many of us are aware, apart from the wider crises all over the country and the globe, that the party itself is going through some growing pains in terms of redefining ourselves. And this seems a very opportune moment to be having this discussion. And so we undertook the work looking at the European Green co-leadership models, Quebec Solidaire, Alberta, something of what's happening in New Zealand, and German Greens, to just try and get that conversation started. So that's why we did it. In terms of why we think it's worth investigating further as a party, well, I go back to my 11 points. I want to just say something that underlines something that David said in his, receiving some of the feedback from members. The leadership of one person is really in many ways structurally a very archaic model. It comes from a time when we believed that one person could possibly understand and represent the will of the many. But historically, the many, as we know, we're all doing this this catching up on our history now. The many who were governed and had a voice in being governed was actually a very select few, and so it was feasible for, say, a white man with a long beard to represent the people, because the people was defined as a bunch of other white men with long beards. So we know, and I hope no one's taking offense at that, but I'm just shorthanding with a bit of humor the history, right, of exclusion and inclusion. We know that we live in a very diverse world, and the notion that one person could possibly understand and represent the views of the many is increasingly less tenable. It never was tenable. We just reduced who they were representing to a small subgroup of the people on the planet or in the country or in the realm. So I think those of us who started this conversation with this committee and the discussion paper just really felt that if ever that single leader model was appropriate, and some of us don't believe it ever was, it's certainly not appropriate anymore. It's not a fit. It's not a fit for the reality of our country. It's not a fit for the reality of our globe, and it's not a fit for the reality of our party. It's just not a fit. structurally? Thanks.
Thanks, Nira. And just to complete the conversation around what got this going, in our leadership campaign, in the leadership campaign we're in now, it's one of the issues that comes up in the questions and answers. When I started traveling across the country, I'm very interested in co-leadership. My background is in dispute resolution as a lawyer. And I felt, you know, top-down leadership is very similar to our dysfunctional court system, which is very hierarchical, also dominated by white males. And so my sense was, what are better ways of resolving disputes? What are better ways of making policy? And when I started having this conversation during my listening campaign, I got very strong answers back. As I said earlier, roughly 80-20, you know, 75-25 of people saying we need change in the leadership structure of the Green Party. So this is a bit of a responsive thing. I'm hearing this from the members. Of course, I wouldn't decide if I'm chosen as leader. It's not up to me. It's going to be up to the members. And there's some argument. We might need a constitutional amendment. We might need a bylaw amendment, but it would certainly be up to the members to decide how we change our constitution in our Green Party or change our bylaws in the Green Party. And my sense is if this does go to a convention, the Greens right now, currently, will need a very strong debate. And the leadership debates and the leadership traveling, the people traveling across the country are a very good way of getting the debate started. I am a fan of co-leadership, but if the members decide, you know what, this doesn't really make sense, then of course I'll be very happy as the new leader just to be the new leader alone. But I would personally prefer to be working in a co-leadership structure. It's not going to happen in this race. There was a question in the chat box about that. This will require at least a year or two of consultations and engagement before we could make this change. Over to you, Evelyn.
Awesome. I think that covers most of the, the panel discussion that we were planning. Do you have any more thoughts on your proposal for co-leadership? I think you covered most of it, David.
Yeah, I did. And I'd love to hear some of the questions from the chat box. Often the chat box questions are the best ones to get the debate going.
I think the main one that I've seen so far, and I'll have to scroll up and check more, is why our deputy leaders can't be empowered more to act as these co-leaders.
Yeah, just for Evelyn, in Canada, we have 2 co-leaders in our structure. So we have 1 leader and the leader appoints 2 co-leaders. And so that's where that question comes from, just for context. And Nira, do you want to start or do you want me to start on that? I personally—
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say on that. We did discuss, sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
That did come up in our committee discussions, and it was one option, would be to structurally build in mechanisms so that the deputy leaders actually do have more, are empowered more, so that there is more of a co-leadership dynamic actually happening. I don't think you want to leave it undefined, because then it depends on who those 3 people are, what the balance is going to look like. So there could be mechanisms put in to structurally even out more of the power between the leader and the 2 deputy leaders. That's a model, an option. That's all for now.
Another question.
Yeah, maybe I can have a reaction if you hear me. Yes. If I can give a reaction. With the Belgium Green Party at the beginning, because I see that there is a question, why not 5 leaders? It's absolutely not a good solution. It didn't work. Where we tried, it absolutely didn't work because there were always discussion and so. But the formula that we have with a committee of 9 persons, but with 2 co-leaders, is the more easy. With 3 persons, my experience, because we had also once 3 persons, is that it's always more difficult. When I say that politically it's also important to react very quickly, it's always more easy to have a call phone or to have a discussion with 2 persons than with 3, where you lose a lot of time. And if you are elected and if your members trust in you, I think for me, for the moment, and I tried the 3 formula, I think the 2 co-leader is the best formula that I know.
Just to jump in on that, Evelyn, I agree. I'm a fan of 2 leaders. I think more than that will complicate things. Switzerland's federation, I understand in Switzerland, they have a council with a rotating leadership on it. Finland has essentially a cooperative government right now, thanks to its proportional representation system. All women, by the way, on their 5 leadership team. So they have a team approach as well. But I do think at some point it becomes more and more difficult. There are many people I know on this call who are concerned about 2. So I think 3 or 5 multiplies the concerns. Nira, I don't know if you've looked into larger numbers as well in your committee's work.
You mean in terms of the actual co-leaders?
Actually,
the number of co-leaders?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing this little discussion about 2's a crowd, 5's too many, 5's a committee, etc. I'm just going to go back to the observation I made, and I didn't flesh it out a lot. It's another discussion we need to have as a party. We found that optimal numbers were 2 or 3. Anything beyond that does become committee work, and that wasn't an optimal number. There are real benefits to 2, maybe 3, and after that, there's a law of diminishing returns. You might be able to divide up the workload, for example, but in terms of the other factors, you begin to, the scale begins to now balance the other way, and you're losing more than you're gaining. So no, we found that 2 was probably optimal. And when we were willing to consider looking into 3 as a model, but I think 2 is, the body put 2 eyes and 2 ears for a reason. And that's a funny little metaphor I'm using, but I've been doing a lot of reading on anatomy and physiology lately. And just recognizing that the body, like the planet, is quite a work of art. And the body optimizes proportions, balances, and ratios, right? So you have 2 eyes, so you can cover, peripheral vision and everything. You can cover a certain range. 3 would be silly and for our needs. Right? So we don't need 5 leaders, but we probably need 2. And 1 isn't enough. So like there's an optimalization of the equation kind of discussion to have, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Nira. I just wanted to acknowledge something that came up in the chat a little earlier. We heard from Evelyne Huytebroeck that the co-leadership model in Europe covers kind of a regional and a gender diversity. But we just want to recognize that there are people that are non-binary, and we want to include that in the conversation of co-leadership and raising up the voices of other intersectional people. So thank you, Mina, for that comment. Just trying to, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if you want to speak to that, feel free to unmute yourself. I'm just going to go down a little further. Oh, there was a question about who becomes prime minister with the co-leadership model. If both of the co-leaders win their seats, and if the GPC wins a lot of seats, and we become the governing party of the country, who would become the prime minister?
I love the positivity of that question, and I'm very interested, Evelyn, if that has become an issue in any European country, and if not, what you think the solution would be on it.
Sorry, is it a question for me? And then repeat it. Yeah, repeat the question.
So the question is, if the Greens became, let's say in Belgium, the Greens won a majority, how would you decide which of the 2 leaders becomes the prime minister?
No. Now, yeah, I understand. It's completely different, and no confusion. For me, when I speak of co-leader, is co-leader of the party. It's not the people who will become minister or prime minister. They can, but it's not an obligation. So for example, for the moment in Belgium, we are in negotiation for the federal government. It's the co-leader who are in the negotiation and discussing with the other parties. And if we have a minister or two ministers, maybe, then it will be probably not one of the two co-leaders. It will be one of our federal MP, probably, but it can be one of the leader. We will see that. But that's the General Assembly of Ecolo who will decide that. And it will be a proposition to the General Assembly, and then they decide. But it's not automatically the co-leader who become the minister.
And when you say the General Assembly of Ecolo, is that like the members of the party will vote?
For a minister, it's always the General Assembly with all the members.
I see.
All the members, yeah.
That's very interesting. So that sounds like a very democratic solution to me, is that in that situation, the members decide.
Yeah. And I think
we found something similar.
Go ahead, Nira.
We found something that might be similar to that in our research, and it was, I believe we found it in the Quebec Solidaire, and it's the notion that you'd have a co-leadership model, you'd have a co-leader de jure and a co-leader de facto. And I'm not going to go into all the details at the moment, because at the moment they're not absolutely on the tip of my tongue, but similar to what Evelyn is describing, I had written here as one of my notes, you know, if the role of the co-leaders are spokespeople on the model of Quebec Solidaire, in a way you could think of it as you have the co-leadership, the co-leaders divided into kind of the inward facing leadership and the outward facing leadership. So that one way of dividing those responsibilities is that one is taking care of leadership within the party, and one is taking care of leadership as representative of the party in, say, the House. That's one way. I mean, that's inward, outward, or leader of the party and a separate vote that elects members of the party, MPs who are then going to be ministers in the House. Those are all mechanics that would have to be worked out if we go ahead as a party with this discussion.
I think, if I'm right, the German Greens do it that way. They have one leader has to be in the legislature, and one is the outside the legislature leader. And they've divided their responsibilities that way. So there'd be no confusion on who is the leader that becomes inside the legislature, the leader. In other words, in our system, the prime minister, in a majority government situation.
Right.
David, I'm just going to acknowledge that Evelyne Huytebroeck has to leave us in a couple minutes here. So thank you very much for your time and sharing all your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. It's kind of fascinating to learn from other Green parties around the world about what works, because I think we're an evidence-based party and we need to listen to what works. I want to give the floor to Amita Kuttner, who is one of our leadership candidates in this race as well. So please take the floor.
Thank you very much. And thank you for putting this on. It's really cool. I will just speak to the idea of splitting co-leadership by gender. I am a supporter of the idea, but I'm also, you know, it's up to the membership how this goes. I'm very excited for the conversation. And I am non-binary, so I am committed and interested in where things go getting past the gender binary. And I think it raises a bigger question. It makes sense why co-leadership globally has been about men and women, but that conversation is changing. And I think it raises the point of what is it that we want? Why is that the representation we are choosing to have? And it's very important that we get different perspectives, different lived experiences, but by accident, you can create a hierarchy saying, well, we only want to care about gender, or we only want to care about race, or we only want to care about ability, for instance. And instead, we should be trying to make sure that we have a variety of different perspectives and have that be fluid. So it can be different at different times, what we really want to focus on in terms of representation. So I would suggest that in any statute or change to bylaws that we have around this, that we talk about the importance of having varied identities because it brings different perspectives, but shy away from saying, well, we always have to have one from this, one from this, one from this, and focusing on any particular identity, just so we have the best chance at representation. And also breaking past the concept that kind of any binary is going to serve anybody in the end. So thanks.
Thanks, Amita.
I totally agree with that.
I'd like,
I think that's
sorry.
a good point. Nira, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out something that some of us recognized in the committee. And we have to just be careful to be very aware, mindful of the discussion of it. It isn't really arithmetic. It isn't, because this notion of co-leadership representing the diversities and intersectionalities of the party and the country, like, you know, the East, the West, the urban, the rural, the periphery, the center, the male, the female, the non-binary, the French, the English, ends up, you can easily end up in a dead end when you're back where the conversation is somehow about quotas. And it's about some kind of arithmetical little game you're trying to play to cover the most ground. And when you do that, then you start ending up having conversations that fall into the tokenism arena, which is why I brought up Kamala Harris earlier, and someone took offense that, well, someone pointed out that she's not a co-leader. The point I was trying to make is that if Joe Biden simply took her on so he can get the non-white female vote, that's a problem, right? Because then the basis of what you're doing it's not solid. You're playing the tokenism game. And I think when we talk about co-leadership in the Green Party, if we continue to talk about it, we want to make sure that we're understanding it not as an arithmetical calculation. We had this, we jokingly said in our committee discussions, let's get a peg, you know, if I can break my leg, I can meet a whole bunch of, we can check off a lot of boxes, right? I'm sort of the brown divorced from the prairies. Like, what boxes can we check off for Nira as a person on the ticket? We don't want to have the conversations that way. And when you get, I think we've all had this experience in different areas, when you get two people talking and they differ, and they have an open, honest discussion and dialogue with good norms around respect so that people can actually learn and hear different views, there's a more synergistic, exponential kind of growth and awareness, and therefore capacity building that happens. It isn't that you add a brown woman and a white man and you get two, you get 3 and 4 and 5, because if the minds are open and the discussion is well done, you start to exponentially increase awareness. So I just want to put in the caution that we get caught up on the numbers of 2 or 3 or 5. We're thinking arithmetically about what co-leadership is. And I really would like for, if we keep having this discussion, to think in a more kind of synergistic way how organisms work, not how traditional old organizations work, because there's a different calculus about building capacity.
I like that idea, and I see Doreen wants to jump in here. Just a quick comment on that. I think a really good way of solving this issue in our bylaw amendment or constitutional amendment, if we make one, is to say, we'll leave it up to the members. People run in pairs, they can team up as they wish, and knowing the Green Party as I do, I guarantee you that if 2 white males teamed up, they would have no hope of winning. So the members will take care of how do we appreciate the people who are running for the leadership in pairs. And I think that helps us to not have to define too closely what does diversity mean. Because as Amita said, and they're right, it really does change over time. So let's build in the flexibility. Doreen, I saw you waving your hand.
Yeah, I have a few things to say from what I've been hearing. And one, I really like the idea of co-leadership. I think we shouldn't have more than 2, because I think it was Evelyn that mentioned something about the general population needing a focus, and we don't want to disperse that focus. And David commented that it won't be happening this time around, but maybe it can get a start. What I would love to see to set the table in Canada for co-leadership is whoever wins this leadership contest. We have so many good people running this time. I would like to see that leader use the other candidates, like appear nationally jointly with as many as will come out for it, and defer questions that are asked by the press or whoever to those with the expertise, like something in science, the leader could defer to Amita, or you know, there's such a broad range of good people and experts that would give the other candidates more national coverage and make the Green Party seem like a real team rather than just follow the leader. And also set the stage for co-leadership and people seeing more. So just my thoughts on that.
I love that comment, Doreen. Thank you very much. And if Amita is the leader, I hope they will defer justice questions to me. So I think it's a really good idea to do this in a collaborative way. I mean, the best outcome from this race would be if the 9 of us were all working as a team. And we can have one leader. If we're working as a team, that it'll transform the party. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Nira, did you want to jump in, or are you good?
Yeah, I would say 2 things. One of the things we found in our committee work as well, I did some research. We all know this again in private business. Like, there's a very good article from Forbes that I have in my folder here. Why co-leadership is the new strategy for company growth. And there's a discussion of Steve Jobs had Steve Wozniak, FDR had Eleanor, Warren Buffett has Charlie Munger. The list goes on. We'd be following very good precedent in the private sector in terms of companies that move ahead, and it's the same benefits or the same arguments in favor, whether it's private or public. And I just want to also say, in terms of the notion of leadership and a sort of maybe outdated notion of leadership, similarly an outdated notion of politics, if we thought of politics as communication and collaboration, rather than thinking of politics as a win-lose game, like an NHL season or a war. And I know that we all say this, and most of us understand, like we'll say, yes, we don't like these war metaphors, and we don't like these, even the sports metaphors. It's not a win-lose game. It's not a zero-sum game. It's a completely different animal. But in fact, many of our structures and processes still lead us to act as though it is a win-lose game. And so we see that all around, including in the leadership contest at moments, but certainly within our own party, that while we say we're doing politics differently, and we have many structures and processes in place to highlight and promote more communication and collaborative and teamwork. In fact, often when we're pushed to the wall, we go back to a win-lose way of thinking about what's happening. Co-leadership is just another way, another structure to put in place that helps move us away from that model and that metaphor and towards politics as communication and collaborative problem solving, creative communication and problem solving, because that is really what we need, right? That's what the party needs to gain traction. That's what the country needs. That's what the world needs. And the more structures we can put in place to move us, because we have the same kind of inertia and regressive tendencies as any organism on the planet to go back to what we know, back to what's familiar, back to what feels comfortable because we know it, than to move into something that's new because it's unfamiliar, it's harder to learn, it takes more time. We have to keep checking ourselves. Is this win-lose or collaboration? I'm thinking. So we need structures to put in place to support that growth towards seeing really doing politics differently as we say we do. Thanks.
Thanks, Nira. Thank you to David, and thank you, Amita, as well, for your comments. I think we've reached the end of our agenda. David, are you good to stay on for another 5 minutes, or do you have to?
I'm happy to stay on as long as there are questions. I do have another event with the Waterloo Young Greens coming up, but why don't we keep going? Maybe another. And the other thing is, you guys can stay on without me. Feel totally free to do that. Who would like to ask the next question, either in the chat box or by waving and jumping in?
Feel free to unmute yourself for the question answer if you want to ask in person.
Maybe from some of the folks who haven't had a chance to express their concerns about it, because we slightly bias this panel with people who are in favor of co-leadership. And it'd be nice to give some time and space to folks who have a different point of view, because there are a significant number of people in our party who have a different viewpoint. And I think it's important for us to hear that too.
Okay, this is Bill Matheson from Halifax here. I am a little concerned about why 2 is such a magical number. I can see the problems with 1. I am not convinced by Nira's arguments in favor of sort of bilateral symmetry. Octopuses get by with, in a number of ways, larger groups. And I'm not sure, like 2 is just a very small committee. It can be deadlocked, go round in circles, just as much as a larger group. But I have actually a larger concern. I have a concern. I used to be the president of the Nova Scotia NDP, and I left because I felt that the leader and his caucus staff, who were answerable only to him, had far too much influence within the party. That's part of the reason why I'm with the Greens now. I'm not in favor of excessive leadership power. I'm also not in favor of sort of institutionally permanent leadership. And you know, I think there should be some kind of refreshing of the leadership from time to time, term limits, something like that. I'm a little concerned that if you bring in co-leaders as a team, when one of them gets a little tired, that person will step back and they will find a person to come in and fill the slot, and you actually have kind of a permanent slate of leaders where there's never a point where you actually make a fresh and unbiased choice, because there's always an incumbent, and we all know the benefits of incumbency. So I wonder if anybody could respond to that.
Nira, would you like to go first, or would you like
I'm
me to?
letting you take, no, I'm letting you take that, David. I'm making
Okay.
a couple notes maybe.
Thanks. Bill, I totally relate to what you're saying about the traditional parties. I think a huge advantage for us as Greens is that we're different from the NDP, the Liberals, and the Conservatives. We're really sincere about participatory democracy. It's a core value, one of our 6 core values. And I love that we're different in that way. And I see the co-leadership model as a way of symbolizing that nationally. The debate around it, you know, the next convention we have where we discuss it will give us another opportunity to show Greens are different, and we're different in a very good way. And I think that's a key advantage for us electorally as well. We're not just like the same old politicians that have run Canada since Confederation. So I really like that difference. And I think there's a political advantage to us pursuing the difference and trumpeting it and celebrating it. So totally agree with your point. One of the reasons I left the Liberals is for exactly the same reason you left the NDP.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thing. Sorry. Just if somebody could comment just on the idea of term limits or refreshing the leadership. That's a different issue than whether we can trust any party.
Yeah, I love that idea too, Bill. I don't want to dominate here, Nira, but I do feel very much that renewal is essential. And I think if we go with co-leadership 2 by 2, we should have term limits where both of them have to lead and run again if they want to, run as a pair or divide up and separate, whatever. But I really do believe that one of the pathologies, one of the problems in the old line parties is you get these leaders who are really entrenched. And we need real leadership reviews, not leadership reviews that can be manipulated or dominated by the leadership team. And building that into these amendments, I think, would be a very, very good idea. If the leader is effective, or if the leadership pair is effective, surely they'll be able to win in a free and fair competition in the next leadership race.
I have a few thoughts.
Mark McKenzie here.
Offer.
May I jump in for a moment?
Sure, Nira, do you want to go first,
Sure.
and then Mark?
No, go ahead, Mark. I'll make a note here and I can talk after. Well, okay, I just want to say one thing, right? The notion of term limits, again, this is good that we're having these discussions and we've started. I don't have all the answers, so I'm not going to try and have an answer to that question of term limits. We didn't get into the mechanics of some of that in the discussion paper, which, by the way, someone asked, and David, after we can figure out how to share the discussion paper, maybe on, I don't know how, you know, rather than with one or two people, with everyone here who wants it. But we do have a federal council, half of which is elected every second year. We have a model for staggering those elections internally and allowing for continuity within the organization. So just off the top, that's you know, one way we can do that. But I don't have all the answers because we didn't go into those mechanics. We presented the discussion papers so precisely so that members could now start having this discussion. And because there were 5 of us on the committee, and we know that all the interested brains who want to get involved in this discussion is going to come up with a better some final options if we decide to look at this. So so that's where we are with that. And I just want to say another thing. Someone brought up PR in the chat. In the same way that proportional representation referenda or discussions don't get very far in this country, partly because people don't understand this new system and it scares them and the mechanics of it seems overwhelming and so they all vote no. We feel it's very important that this is why we got to a certain point with the discussion paper and then released it and want us all to talk about it, these conversations to be happening. Because until and unless enough of us really understand what does it mean, what's involved, what would change, what would stay the same, how are they doing it elsewhere, what are the pitfalls, what are our answers to those? If we don't understand those deeply and in a fulsome way, then if we were to, as a membership, try and vote whether we should try this or not, everyone's going to say no. Most people are, because it's going to seem like there are too many unknowns because it seems so new. So this is very good to have this discussion so that the co-leadership option doesn't fall away from the table because not enough people actually understand it. The next step is these discussions, and I'm happy to share that paper as far and wide as we are, as far and wide as people want it. Thanks.
So I take from that, Nira, you might put it up on the website for the Members for Growth and Renewal. Is that one idea? You could also put it up on
that would be one way.
If you want.
Yeah, it didn't actually come out of the Members for Growth and Renewal, right? It came, I mean, a group of us, not all of whom are members in the Membership for Growth and Renewal group. In fact, General Council, Federal Council did not task us as a subcommittee to go and look at this. This was truly grassroots. This idea came up as a topic of discussion in an EDA 2.0 discussion one Saturday morning several months ago. And the first reaction among several people was, that'll never fly. What is that? It's not in our constitution. And a few of us after that conversation said, you know what, this seems interesting enough and this seems timely enough that let's look into it. So we basically mandated ourselves as a little committee of 5. We invited other people on EDA 2.0 because that's where the conversation started. And we just went to it and did the work. And just to share a funny thing with you at the end, because it was a very short committee, we actually almost disbanded and we just voted at our last meeting a few weeks ago to put ourselves in dormancy for now because the first leg of our work was done and we're sharing the discussion paper. But someone made the comment that was the most efficient committee that they've ever worked on.
I love that. Over to you, Mark. Do you want to go next, Mark?
Oh, sure. Just wanted to point out a couple things from Bill's question about term limits, and there's been other constitutional questions. Basically, that's what we're talking about here. The co-leader discussion is a whole change to the Constitution. So just a little perspective on that. In 2006, when Jim Harris stepped down, there was a constitutional change that happened with the new leader. They didn't know who the new leader was going to be, but they put a lot of power in the hands of that new leader, whoever it was going to be. It was either going to be David Chernishenko or Elizabeth May, so that they could operate as a leader. So they were given the power to appoint the 2 deputy leaders instead of those being elected by the membership. They appoint the whole shadow cabinet. They're also a voting member on federal council. So there's a lot of power in the office of the leader. At the time in 2006, there was supposed to be a mandatory leadership contest in 2010. So this leader, whoever it was going to be, had 4 years to do something or face a leadership election. Federal Council at the time, in 2010, proposed a change. So to cancel that leadership convention, and that was replaced with a leadership review. So whoever gets elected leader only needs 60% approval of the members who vote, which is often much less than 20%. So my point that I'm getting to is that we're coming in with a new leader with the same constitution that goes really back to 2006. It was modified a few times. I'm hoping that we can get a whole new constitution. It'll have to be after this leader is elected, and I hope that a lot of people get engaged with that, because that's really, I think, what the party needs, because there's just too much power and emphasis on one person.
Thanks very much.
I'd like to say something to that.
Go ahead, Nira.
Something that came out of our report, and again, this is certainly subject to debate because it has been debated. And so that would be part of our larger conversation going forward as members. But I will quote from the second page of our report, or our discussion paper, I should say. This is a member of Federal Council saying, I quote, "I don't think our constitution or bylaws prevent our leader from choosing another member that they would call co-leader," unquote. And later on in the discussion paper, the GPC Constitution says nothing about the leader beyond giving them a voting seat on Federal Council and requiring them to meet Elections Canada process requirements, Article 7.1.2. And then another fun fact, it's labeled as fun fact on page 3. If leaders were to strictly follow the constitutional definition of their roles and nothing more, then the only leader-specific responsibility would be to pick a shadow cabinet and be done. And deputy leaders would do nothing at all. So in terms of maybe the youth of our party or something, what is expressly both allowed and disallowed in the Constitution, there's a fairly wide latitude for interpretation. And a lot of what we as members think, and some people have said to us, this is unconstitutional, these are really actually norms. They're the practice and the usage within the party so far for the last 37 years. And some of us believe, because they've been that way for so long, that they are somehow set in stone in the Constitution. And in fact, some members of our committee have gone through the Constitution, and the argument can be made that there is nothing in the Constitution that forbids co-leadership, even right now. So that would be a very good, robust discussion to have, and it would get people looking at our Constitution, which might be helpful.
I like that analysis a lot, Nira. We asked a lawyer on our team to look at it, and we came to the same conclusion. And it's very similar to Canada's Constitution. My first job in law after becoming a lawyer was in the Department of Justice of Ottawa. And a key part of being a constitutional lawyer at the Department of Justice is understanding convention, constitutional convention. And so
Yes.
the conventions around Green Party leadership are very important, but convention isn't written down and can very easily be changed. So totally agree with your analysis. Thank you, Mark, also for that comment. Really appreciate it. I see Doreen has her hand up. Does anybody else? We want to give people a chance, but if nobody else puts their hand up, Doreen's next. She's had a chance to go twice, but that's perfectly fine unless somebody else wants to jump in. No, go for it, Doreen. Thank you.
I thought like Sarah Nicholson wanted to at some point, but maybe you're done. I don't know. I'll be quick. Mark might have answered part of my question. Is part of the reason why I would just like to see 2 rather than a whole bunch, like Bill has suggested, was because we do have a federal council. And if everybody's sitting on this council, I'd be worried about this gang of leaders would kind of take over from the federal council, and it would become something different or not necessary. That's why I'd like to keep it to 2, because I think the leader has a lot of clout anyhow, even if it's just one, can hold a lot of sway. And so if the leader is a committee, what will happen with the federal council? Maybe it's not possible. I don't know enough about it, but maybe someone could explain if that would work or not.
That makes a ton of sense to me, Doreen. I think that's an excellent point. Thanks for making that. Sarah, sorry I missed you. Do you want to go ahead next?
Sure, yeah. I don't really have anything new to contribute, but just wanted to second some ideas in the sense, first of all, thank you for opening up the floor to any concerns about the idea of co-leadership, because 80-20 or not, 50-50, 40-50, the only way to move towards that is to open it up to those concerns and work those concerns into the answer. Because again, you know, it's not any one methodology or any one philosophy that is guaranteed to work. It's about the devil, like was mentioned also, the devil is in the details, you know, and it's opening up the floor to those concerns so that we can refine that idea. And, you know, it's a part of conversation, you know, one person asks a question, but everyone else gets to hear the answers and allows space for creativity and discussion, because we all know that, you know, you could take that idea and it could become very superficial and used as a marketing scheme, as this idea of this progressive, open democracy. But at the end of the day, how is it being used and how is it being enacted? So I just really appreciate the concerns that were brought up, and because I can see how you take those concerns and we start to create a clearer image of what it is we want as a party.
I totally agree with that. And Sarah, thank you for raising that. Diversity is a core value in the Green Party, right? It's one of our 6 core values as well. And that includes diversity of opinion. It's so important that we sort of protect that diversity of opinion and, you know, celebrate and protect people who may not have a majority viewpoint. So excellent point. I see Fiona McMurran has her hand up. Fiona, did you want to go next?
Thanks, David. This is a great discussion. Thank you to everybody for holding it. And I like the fact that, you know, there's a diversity of opinion here. I just want to say, just from my very personal point of view, there's something to me about the co-leadership idea. It's a dialogue. And just the whole notion of starting everything to do with politics, which is how people live together, as a dialogue. There's something in that just really speaks to me well. I mean, two people who will have fairly strong personalities, or they wouldn't have gotten to the co-leadership position, learning how to, you know, doing the give and take very well together, to me is a really good model for the party, and maybe even for other parties. And the other thing I'd like to say is that I think it's just from, you know, social media gives you distorted pictures of everything, but coming from another party, I just want to say to Greens, we're not going to get perfection. We're not, you know, we're never going to be able to say, well, we can't do this because this isn't going to work. We're green. We're about growing things. I had a great discussion last week on an ideas program about Darwin, and there was a sentence that really struck me. Evolution doesn't move towards perfection, but towards diversity. And I just love that. I just think that.
I love that. That's so great. Thank you for sharing that, Fiona. That's awesome. And in these discussions that we've had as we travel across the country, several people have said to me, well, you know, you'd really have to make sure that you teamed up with somebody who shared your views and had the same. And my instinct is the opposite. You know, it would be much better actually to have somebody with very different views from you. So you're actually looking at it from both sides, and you're sort of building in this concept of protecting different opinions into the co-leadership itself. So can you imagine having a pro-nuclear and an anti-nuclear advocate as the co-leaders? That might be going too far, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Building in different perspectives, I think, is so important. Sorry, Nira, I'm talking too much. Over to you.
No, I just want to add to that 2 things. Something that Fiona's saying, I just love what Fiona's saying, if I may say that. The notion of just always starting with, your starting point is always dialogue. Your starting point is not always monologue, and then dialogue is some kind of secondary thing that you do, right? The starting point is dialogue. And the notion of progress, not perfection. In school, we talk about growth mindset and fixed mindset. And we are the Green Party after all. And we are working towards, our entire sort of frame of reference is, you know, to be pioneers and trailblazers and think outside the box in terms of what the country and the globe is facing now, that we know we need to do that. And so that's a growth mindset, exactly what Fiona is talking about. It's, conflict is a fact of life. So the notion that we'd aim, as David says, in a co-leadership model to get two people who think alike so that we can get things done fast because they think alike is actually counterproductive to what you'd be trying to do with co-leadership, which is to bring two very different people with different skill sets and views and experience, etc., and then have a really robust, courageous, honest, rigorous conflict resolution mechanism. It's that process that becomes the key to things getting done very well. And you could potentially then put any two people, although I'm not saying we just put any two people, but put any two diverse, you know, people from diverse backgrounds in every way into that process and get better outcomes. Because if the process is followed well, then you get the best thinking, the most honest, the most rigorous feedback, the most robust and yet respectful, because the norms would be around respect. There'd be some bottom lines about how those conversations happen, so that it doesn't degenerate into that kind of bland, mediocre decision-making by committee that some people think co-leadership and committee leadership and group work ends up giving you. It doesn't have to deliver that. It's the process of conflict resolution that changes that. And I don't think we're there yet. We don't have that process, but we could have that process. And that's really the leader of the party. That process is based on our core values, and that becomes the leader of the party in some ways.
Can I just jump in and add that in like a couple years, if we have a follow-up meeting on this subject, the Alberta Greens will have more to say, because we did do a constitutional amendment in November last year to allow for co-leaders. And so in 2 years' time, we will elect our second leader to help Jordan Wilkie, our current leader. And we'll see how it works. It's kind of uncharted territory for us. I see that Diane is here today, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but she was the one who proposed the bylaw amendment. So Diane, if you want to speak to it, that's great. If not, that's cool. But we can have a follow-up meeting in 2 years, and we'll let you know how it's working.
Yeah, thanks, Evelyn. This has really been great. And this was first proposed in the Green Party when it was resurrected about a decade ago. And there was absolutely no interest whatsoever. And you were at the meeting, and so were you, David, when it passed with quite a substantial majority. So in that decade, thought on the idea of a co-leader had changed over that decade. And there was discussion in between during that decade as to the idea and what would be the advantage, the disadvantage. And this has been a very good session today.
Yeah, Diane, thank you very much. And thanks for putting forward that meeting in Red Deer. Was great. Machiavelli has a saying that there's nothing more dangerous than changing the constitution of a state. And you might say the same thing about a party. It's a very challenging thing to do. It's going to require a lot of discussion. And I was really impressed by the Alberta Greens discussion in Red Deer. And I think we'll need the same thing inside our party. This is just the start of quite a few conversations, and the constitutional amendment process, or a bylaw amendment process, even if the federal council has the power to do it, is going to take time.
Yeah, and it's been very helpful having Evelyn's experience in both Belgium and the European Union. And also, were you online to hear the leader, co-leader from New Zealand a couple of weeks ago, which was also really good.
Really good. I think this is great. We're just starting a conversation. I have an embarrassing thing to say on this call, which is I didn't realize it would go this long, which is fantastic. And I'm going to have to leave you all. I hope you continue with the call. I don't mean to be rude, but I have a meeting with the Waterloo Young Greens, and I want to treat them with respect by getting there on time. So I'm going to leave you, but please do stay on, Evelyn and Nira. Thank you for carrying on if you want. I unfortunately have to leave, and I really appreciate, Evelyn, you moderating, jumping in and moderating so well. Nira, thank you for all the hard work you and your committee did. That was just awesome. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'll leave, but I hope you stay on and that there are many more questions.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
I have a question for Nira.
Sure.
Did you consider if the two MPs were elected and in the House, the Speaker often says, "I'm the leader of the Green Party" or something. Would they say leaders? Like, would the House of Commons recognize two leaders, or did you consider that?
Yeah, I think this goes down into some of the mechanics now that we didn't press on. We recognize that these were all things that have to be researched, decided, debated, discussed. The provisions, from what I understand in Elections Canada, is we would have one leader in the House. So if we were to decide, if we had two leaders, one of those two leaders could potentially, the members would choose one of those two co-leaders to sit in the House as our leader in the House, and the other might be someone who worked either internally in the party or externally with the media, something like that. Or we might have two co-leaders, and then we might elect, as someone said earlier, I think Evelyn from the European Union said that in their model, there's a third minister who is actually elected internally from the MPs elected to be the leader in the House. My understanding at this stage, unless we wanted to try and overhaul the constitution of how Canada governs itself, is there'd be no provision for us to have two Green leaders in the House. Does that answer the question?
And I think New Zealand, did they not, Nira, take turns, maybe 6 months at a time?
Yeah, I'm not, I forgot, I mean, we looked into all of those, and at the moment, I can't remember how they do it, but yes, for sure, my understanding is nowhere that we looked do two leaders sit in the House as two we get one seat in the House.
Yeah.
So we have to internally figure out our co-leadership model so that we decide how are we going to choose the person who's going to go and represent us in the House as the Green Party leader in the House. But that needn't be, right, what Evelyn was saying is that it could be a completely separate person from the co-leaders who are responsible for, say, inward-facing party operations and outward-facing party operations, say with the press or the membership. So there's various ways to configure this. I can't say exactly at the moment how the New Zealand Greens do it, because I've frankly just forgotten at the moment. Now, if I had a co-leader sitting here, that person would probably remember and jump in. Anything else? Evelyn, are you there? I'm not sitting here as the person with all the answers, by the way. I'm happy to keep the discussion going just because I did a little extra research. But I think this is, I think that like next steps around this is I'll go back to our committee and figure out what's the best way to share this discussion paper. It was shared on EDA 2.0 so a few weeks ago. So anyone who is on EDA 2.0 or knows someone can ask them to forward it, but we will certainly make sure that we figure out the best way to get it out. Whether, to be honest, we have to approach the party and say, would you post this on the GPC website? Because we were not mandated by the Federal Council or anybody at the party to do this. We did this research on our own. This is, as I said, really a grassroots effort. And it's not allied, as someone mentioned, with MGNR, although a couple of us are also on MGNR. It was a separate initiative because we were interested in this model independently.
Fiona, you have a question?
Sorry, I have my hand up there. I just wanted to point out that, of course, we're in the situation now where we have our leader in the House is not the leader of the party, and that will be the same. Frankly, I mean, whichever one of the 9 candidates wins, they don't have a seat in the House at the moment. So
that's right, exactly. And we have effectively 2 leaders now. We say we have an interim party leader and we have a parliamentary leader. I mean, we're doing that de facto because of the situation we're in at the moment. So clearly these things can be done. These more flexible arrangements can be made.
Mark, go ahead, and then I think we'll wrap up.
Okay, so just the European, Evelyn, mentioned that, I didn't quite follow it actually, that when the question came up about who would be Prime Minister, it wouldn't be necessarily any of the co-leaders, it would be voted by the General Assembly. So I guess my question is for Nira, and maybe this is in your report, but somehow we're sort of mixing two different systems. We're talking about co-leaders. We have a first past the post system. So that's our thinking. Whereas where they have these co-leaders, it's a proportional representational system with a list. So if we get 12 seats, it's the top 12 on that list. And I'm not sure if it's been thought through how that affects the full leadership spectrum.
I'm going to admit to you that I also got a bit lost in the explanation she gave, and I would suggest it started to sound to me a bit like the UN, the General Assembly of the UN. So I was not absolutely clear on the mechanism. I would propose that were we thinking this is a conversation worth continuing, that would be the next step, right? The next discussion paper that would come out would be a group of people, maybe some of us from the first committee and others who want to join, looking into now, if there's enough interest, some of those different models, specifically just the way the PR discussion, evolved into, after the first survey question of what is PR, mixed member proportional and single transferable vote, we went into these models and looked at them. And then the third stage after that is to share that thinking in a clear way with members so they can understand and have intelligent conversations where they actually understand these different models and don't get lost in the details, so that if we were to have a vote, we could have a meaningful, informed, fully informed vote on whether this is something we wanted to try. So Mark, in answer to you, I'd say, like, if you wanted to, if we take the committee out of dormancy after this and people want to join us and go into that next step, especially people with constitutional and that kind of numbers inclination, that would be the next step in exploring this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nira, for coming and for sharing all that work. We really appreciate it.
It was fun. I have to say that we had a lot of fun. And we were a committee of 5 and we accomplished our objective in record time. So, it is very possible for committees with clear focus and good norms around rigor and observing timelines, because we did what we accomplished. We did what we set out to accomplish in record time with lots of diverse opinions about how to go about this. So that committee in itself was an example of how collaboration actually really can put you ahead when it's done with the right kinds of norms around it, which do include a certain amount of radical honesty. What happens with committees is often people stop saying what they really think because of all the pressures around whatever you want to call it, right? The group peer pressures around speaking out, etc. It was very effective, and we came up with actually what was a pretty good product in record time, which is testament to the value of potential well-done co-leadership for the party as well. Anybody who wants to join, just let us know. Sounds like we're ready to reconstitute for phase 2.
Thanks, Nira. Thank you everyone for attending. I know we've dropped, most of our attendees have left already, but if you guys have any more comments or if there's further discussion, you can always go onto Facebook on David Merner's Facebook page and find the live stream and comment below, and we can continue the discussion there. But thank you so much for attending today and for all the awesome comments and discussion. It was a really lively discussion, so thank you all for attending, and hopefully we'll see you at another roundtable event before this leadership contest is done. And if you haven't nominated candidates, please go ahead and do that. I'm sure they will greatly appreciate it.
And if I could just say, Evelyn, if anybody is specifically interested in sort of finding out more about the committee and getting getting involved in the committee on co-leadership, probably the most direct way is to just email me directly, and the committee will figure out a way, if we're going to come out of dormancy, to figure out how we're going to get stage 2 started.
Thanks so much, Nira. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.